Join me once again in welcoming director Takeshi Fukunaga and DP Daniel Satinoff. Okay, let's do it this way. We have cards for you to fill out if you have a question. So please raise your hands, and there are 2 runners on the side, and they'll bring you paper and pencils. Do that as quickly as possible so that we can get to your questions as quickly as possible. And meanwhile, I will ask some questions. Let's start with the obvious one. You made a film about a Liberian immigrant in New York City. And then you made a film about a young Ainu boy coming of age in Hokkaido. Now you've made this film. Why this film now?
So this movie is inspired by this book called The Legend of Tono, which is a collection of short legends, folktales, sometimes rumors that was published in 1910. And I was very fascinated by the book because it gave me a great insight of how the kind of relationship people used to have with nature, and like how the society was formed, and it felt so different from how Japan and Japanese people are now, and yet so connected to. And having lived here many years, one of the reasons why I moved back to Japan 4 years ago was to really kind of re-explore and rediscover Japan. And so through this film, I wanted to, I guess, like study and the film, and then see what comes out of it.
You went back 4 years ago. That means right when COVID was happening.
Like before.
So did that affect the film at all?
Yes, definitely. So that was the original inspiration, but of course, like to make it today, I wanted to make it relevant to the society today. And then the writing process happened right in the middle of the COVID. So many things happened. There was a negative, incident in Japan that was also became part of the stories. Like, for example, very like a peer pressure imposed on one another was became very evident in a very disappointing way. For example, healthcare workers were discriminated, and many people who got infected were accused of just by being infected. And so that kind of peer pressure and gender inequality was one of the key things that we put that into the story.
I had mentioned earlier that this is another project tonight that is a demonstration of how the Japanese film industry is changing, how it's not all Japanese people making films only with Japanese people, for Japanese people. And you probably noticed another non-Japanese on stage here with me tonight. And Takeshi's, one of his producers is also actually from New York, Eric Nyari, and also your musician is not Japanese. Why did you decide that you needed a DP who was not Japanese to tell this very, very Japanese tale?
2 key reasons. One is because I studied filmmaking here, and then I'm familiar with more of an American way of running the set instead of a Japanese way, which is quite different. So I wanted to have a creative partner that's on the same page with me as far as how to operate the set. And the second one was because it's very Japanese story and Japanese setting, I wanted to have a different kind of eye and an aesthetic to hopefully make something more, I guess, unexpected and different from the period pieces that were made before.
Do you want to talk about your experience, Daniel? How was it? Was it like the first time you shot in Japan?
Well, it was the second time I shot in Japan. I had worked on a TV show there, and so I had already learned a little bit of the kind of. I don't speak Japanese, so there's a bit of a culture shock, and also just a language barrier there to working with crew that don't speak English. But what I found was that like there's English and there's Japanese, and then there's like the language of filmmaking, which is kind of international or transcends the language barrier. And so like that I think helped. It helped me a lot to have to like I understood the script. I had read the script in English, but on a day to day like on set, like everything is in Japanese. All of the crew and cast speak Japanese, so kind of bringing. I needed to understand what was happening within the film at any given time. So like I think that comes through in the way that we shot it too. Is that like the visual storytelling aspect of it had to be separate from the language, and I think that kind of was how I came to it. You know.
Interesting. And how was it for you collaborating with a non-Japanese DP?
No, he was wonderful. You know, like there are many like surprises that I was hoping to get, and but at the same time we are on the same page as far as what kind of visual that we were looking for and what's more important than the other. One of the things we discussed was we wanted to make it as realistic or authentic as possible, and then the exposure, the darkness. We were instead of trying to light everything, we were trying to embrace the darkness, and then so that in contrast you can feel the when Rin goes to the mountain and see the sunlight, and then that becomes more effective.
Yeah, it was very, very dark, but so beautiful, right? And all that, you felt completely absorbed into the late 18th century because there was no fake lighting like we have these days.
Yeah, we wanted
What
to
were
kind
your
of,
biggest challenges doing that sort of thing?
well, we shot with very high ISO on the camera, so that was intentionally to kind of bring in some noise into the image and also to make it feel like the image is kind of like coming out of the shadows. And we used all of the firelight in the film is real fire. I think pretty much entirely in all of the night scenes, and so that was important to me. I think to kind of there's no electrical light, there's no fake light. It's all fire, or it's all moonlight, or it's all no light, and that was kind of the goal with the night sequences, especially.
Let's talk about casting. Does everyone recognize Anna Yamada from a previous really huge hit that we had here in 2018? Anyone? Liverleaf? Do you remember Liverleaf? She was the cover girl for our catalog, our poster, everything from this film, Liverleaf, in 2018. Did you see the film?
Yes, that was one of the reasons I decided to cast her.
Can you say more?
She has a great presence. I really liked how she can express herself without relying on lines. And for this particular movie, she does feel like the person from that time. She has some little bit of I don't know what the word is, but not too in a good way, not too sophisticated. She can but because that was very important to cast people who has the faces and the presence that can that fit into this world.
And the other casting too, so many, I'm sure many of you recognized a lot of the actors. How did you choose Mirai Moriyama to play the mountain man?
So I had many discussions with producers, and then for that particular role, he's an amazing actor, but also a wonderful dancer, and so he's trying to express himself physically, and because this character doesn't have any dialogue, so that was very important quality to really express this character, and also he really, after meeting him and having a discussion, he really understood what kind of thing like themes that I'm trying to relay, and what are important to the story as a whole.
And did you have any issues shooting in the mountains? I know that partially it was shot on the mountain in the film.
Yeah, we the way the schedule kind of worked out was we shot most of the mountain work at the beginning of the film, which is also all of the most difficult things for us to do in turn technically, and also just we would have to walk up this mountain basically to go shoot and carry all the gear up, and it was really a team effort of everyone carrying tripods and lights and hair and makeup and everything, and that was definitely really difficult, but I think it adds a lot to, you feel it in the movie, that we're in the mountains, that we're in these remote places, and even though it was difficult, I think it really benefited us from a visual standpoint, especially. And yeah, it was hard, but it was great. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, you say it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Especially working with all of the Japanese crew was fantastic, and even most of the electrical department didn't speak English, so I had to learn. I learned the Japanese words for the different gels and things like that, and they were learning the English words for them. So I may say oh, I want this gel in Japanese, and they would say it back to me in English, or be so excited when I got 1, 2, 9 correct in Japanese and things like that, and so that was everyone was in really good spirits, even if we were trudging through the mud with gear and stuff to get to when she goes into the mountains, and there's that moment where she looks back, and that was an incredible, by the end of the day, just a mud river that we were carrying everything through to get to and back and forth in that area, and the ADs are running around with smoke machines to make all the atmosphere and the feeling of that moment. But I think that everyone was it was really hard, but everybody was excited about it too, because it was important to really be in this kind of place for the actors and for the frames and for everything. It kind of seeps into the image, I think.
So you actually shot everything in Tohoku?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's look at some of these audience questions. How did you research Tohoku culture and customs? And how much was based on historical research versus fiction?
Read many books, and then we had some meetings with experts. And the co-writer I wrote the script with, Ikue Osada-san, she's done a play based on the same book, Legends of Tono, and then has done many period pieces. So she was very instrumental as far as historical facts and then making it realistic. But there are definitely some fictional elements, Rin, throwing the baby in the river. I mean, deceased baby in the river in the beginning. I'm sure some people has done it, but it's not everybody did it the way she did it in the movie. But then there was a spiritual element, how she, the words she says, to the baby and stuff.
But actually, there was a huge famine, historical famine at that time, right? And there was virgin sacrifice going on, and those sorts of fun facts. Okay. With my limited Japanese language, I can tell that this is a dialect, perhaps the Tohoku dialect. Can you tell us a little about how you went about writing the dialogue and doing dialect training?
Yes. So this is tonal dialect, which is where the stories and then where the book is coming from, and it's in Iwate Prefecture, part of Tohoku, and so we had a dialect coach or expert who recorded every single line in tonal dialect and shared it with all the actors. And then the one homework I gave them was to practice those dialect because I try to use different ways to close the gap between this the time period the movie is set and then the modern time, and then one of the ways for me was to use a dialect to try to recreate the setting.
Right. And I don't know if you're all aware of this, but most Japanese films just use standard Japanese, which everyone speaks in Tokyo. So it's really difficult to believe some of the characters if they're supposed to be somewhere where there's a really strong dialect. So this is done really, really well, and I know they worked really hard to achieve
Yes,
that.
they did a wonderful job.
Okay, here's a question for Daniel. How did you achieve the dreamlike images?
So there's a few different things that we did. So we rated the camera at a high ISO, which what that does in some ways is it causes the highlights to be much softer and the shadows to be deeper, and so there's less information in the shadows, which is kind of counterintuitive for how dark the film is, but that I think adds a little bit of artifice to the image that helps to, helps you to suspend your disbelief a little bit. And then, so on top of that, we shot with vintage lenses, Canon K35s, and then for the mountain scenes, we added some very heavy diffusion, like 2 different types of diffusion at high intensities. And then for the village scenes, we had a lighter diffusion shot at a deeper stop, so that we had the mountains especially felt more dreamlike because there was more diffusion. It was more wide open, so the image is just generally softer, and those lenses fall apart a little more. And then for the village, I wanted to make it a lot more kind of it's harsher, and so we shot a little bit deeper stop so that the lenses are sharpened. We use less diffusion, and so that was kind of the general theme there.
I didn't know this either.
Well, yeah, I did a little bit. I did like a day of testing when I got out of quarantine in Japan, and shot a bunch of different stops on. I knew the lens I want to use, in different stops and different densities of diffusion, and then from that, kind of decided on what the cocktail of that stuff was.
Can you tell us a little bit about the sound of the mountain? The question is actually what inspired the sound of the mountain, and the sound of the mountain. And tell us a little about the soundtrack and your soundtrack designer and musician.
Music. He's Alex Funtai. He used to have this, and he used to go by this artist named Dirty Beaches, and I've been, fan of his music, and then I was.
And based in New York, right?
Yes.
Dirty Beaches.
Well, he used to live in LA, but now lives in New York. But I was connected to him through the editor and also a great filmmaker, Christopher Yogi, and because they've been collaborating on his film, and I think his music really added the different layers, to the stories and scenes, and I think, this is just my interpretation, but because of his Asian background, and then kind of not, of course, even though it's not Japanese, I think he understood the bringing out the presence of nature, and then how it's important to the characters in this movie, and that really how to say was communicated through the kind of music he played for this.
I wonder if you think that speaking of nature, that nature is a bigger villain than man?
Like a villain?
I
Well-
mean, certainly in your film, nature wreaks a lot of havoc. There's also a moment where it seems that nature saves the day. But
Yeah,
obviously it's tough what the villagers are going through, and that's something they can't control because the control is elsewhere.
right. Well, it's certainly something that humans cannot control, and then it has Japanese origin, religion. Shintoism has, is a religion that sees the gods in nature, and then that's coming from the relationship, the Japanese people have, with nature, and then like how they hold art towards nature, and that's something I feel close to, the kind of idea of the relationship. So it's not only those like the way I guess like express those things in the movie. It's not only coming from the book or like how which the core of those like religion or Japanese religion or culture, but also something I admire. So don't necessarily say it's villain or not, but it is I feel like a greater existence.
And did you think a lot about, I mean, I'm sure that you both talked about this as well, but when you were looking and doing your testing and so forth, did you think a lot about how to express nature that can be both all-embracing and all rejecting?
I don't know that necessarily that was. I thought about it in that way. I guess more I think the bigger thing was thinking about the like. Yes, in the village they're influenced by nature, but they're it's a rural place. They're within nature, but it's a different thing than the like complete embrace of the natural world that exists in the mountains. And I think that was kind of like for me the kind of the difference of like the villagers are trying to overcome what exists in nature, and the mountain man is trying to just live within it, and Rin finds solace in that. Like she never fit in with the kind of like pushing against what exists in the world, and it's only when she kind of like embraces it that she finds happiness, I guess.
So for you, Takeshi, is this a happy ending?
It's not bad ending for me, at least. But in a sense, I mean, from the perspective of Rin, maybe not necessarily from the villagers, because she became, kind of like released from all those like things that were like keeping her down, and then made her decision to go her own way. So
In the sequel, do you think that we'll see lots of young village girls who are chafing against all of the restrictions on their existence going and living with her, and they'll start a colony in the...
that's for someone else's project, I think.
Last words, Daniel? I saw you wanted to say something.
Oh, I just want to say that it is a happy ending for me, I think. Because I think that, yeah, she finally gets freedom. And there's that moment that there's like a close-up of her where she's on the post where she's looking at the mountain and thinking about the mountain man, and she's like at peace almost. And I think that's good. That's good for her,
Yeah, actually, speaking of the last scene or the ending, one of the many wonderful things the sound mixer did, sound log, is there's like a gentle wind that's like happening as she walks to the mountain, and he added how do you call it, sleeping sound, of a mountain man in the.
So maybe this is the question that you Yeah, the sound of the mountain.
Yeah. So like it sounds just like a gentle wind, but it's actually a mountain man's breath. That's why he's sleeping. So it does, I think it does like subconsciously gives a very I guess like warm humane feeling, and so that I think added to the feeling of the ending.
Thank you both so much for coming and sharing this beautiful film with us. Takeshi Fukunaga, Daniel Satinoff, thank you all so much for joining us.